It's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Jonathan Cook, DMD. He's a cosmetic dentist who owns 2 successful practices in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He graduated from Nova Southeastern University in 2008 with honors and won awards in Prosthodontics, Implantology, and was inducted as a member of Omicron, Kappa, Upsilon National Dental Honor Society. He is a fellow of the International Congress of Oral Implantologists and has completed hundreds of hours of CE from implantology to botox to fillers to occlusion. He's been practicing dentistry for just over 11 years and has built his practice's reputations on integrity, passion, teamwork, and empathy. He has purchased 7 practices in 9 years since his first practice acquisition in 2010, learning a ton along the way. Most notably, he has grown his business from $500,000 to $5 million in 6 years. He attributes his exponential growth to the implementation of strong systems, keeping things simple, building a healthy culture with a stellar team, folding in old practices into his existing locations, marketing, and never letting his foot off the gas. He is passionate about priming his team for success, keeping his mind, body, and soul in tip-top shape, giving back to others through charity and coaching, and balancing work and life. Holy moly, I'm so excited to have you on the show because, you know, these graduates all believe, I don't want to own a practice. It's too complicated, and all the DSOs come in there, and they offer free pizza at lunch. They all come in there, and then they just scare them. That pharmacist thought they were going to have their own practice. Now they all work at Walgreens and CVS. And you guys are all going to work for us. The DSOs are taking over. So they go from miserable job to miserable job. And finally, the only reason they start their own practice is because they're so sick of working for anyone else. And here you have done it 7 times in 9 years. So kudos to you, Jonathan. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story. So
thank you so much. It's an honor.
So you think the DSOs are going to take over in 20 years from now? Everybody will be a dental associate at McDentals?
I do not think so, no. I mean, they have their place and they're growing. That percentage is growing certainly more than the solo practitioner. That's for sure.
And you might have a very interesting story to tell because you graduated at the worst time in the world, 2008, right before Lehman Brothers meltdown. And everybody thinks it's the end of the world, but, you know, I had the end of the world in 1980 when I graduated from high school. Interest rates 21%, inflation and unemployment double-digit. And then I graduated May of 87, October 87, Black Monday. The market fell a quarter in a day. And then you had the Y2K bubble pop in March of 2000, Lehman's Day, another day. You know, I always tell when everybody starts talking about all this paranoia, I'm like, you know, you're going to live through this, right? So what was it like graduating at a economic collapse?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, 2008 was rough, and then it kind of carried on until 2009, 2010. Banks weren't lending at all. If you're a graduating dentist at that point and you didn't have mommy and daddy money that was going to help you, front the money for a purchase of a practice, you were going to have a really tough time getting financed. So that was a challenge. And then just finding a job, let's say you didn't want to go out and just start from scratch or buy a practice from somebody, finding an associateship was really, really hard. I ended up at 3 different associateships throughout the week. So I had like a Tuesday and a Thursday job. I had a Monday, Wednesday, Friday job, and then I had a Saturday job. And I kind of wanted to get the feelers out there, and it actually helped me a lot in regards to figuring out first what I don't want, and then also seeing how different practices work and don't work, and really getting a feel and getting my speed up too, of course. So, but man, for the first year or 2 to try to find a job at that time was really tough.
So the filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection by financial services firm Lehman Brothers on September 15, 2008 remains the largest bankruptcy filing in U.S. history, with Lehman holding over $600 billion in assets. And you walked out graduating from that. Did you ever think you'd be alive 10 years later?
I mean, I heard it from a lot of different perspectives. I had a lot of friends who were in real estate and they got crushed. I mean, most of them went bankrupt. And then I had other friends who were in DC where Obama came in and it was bigger government. So they didn't see that massive decline in housing prices and the economy. You just didn't feel it as much there. So I had a couple different perspectives. But man, it was the global economy went into cardiac arrest, and it wasn't for maybe a couple more years before people kind of could take a deep breath and a sigh of relief.
Well,
but, I didn't.
My favorite Nobel Prize winning economist, Joseph Schumpeter, who wrote the book Business Cycles. I remember reading that book, and I read the first page, and I couldn't stop till it was over. But basically, humans are irrational. They make irrational decisions, and that's why you always have a business cycle. And nobody knows everything. We don't know what we don't know. But, man, it happened in 80, 87, 2000, 2008. And it smells like teen spirit again. I mean, it totally smells like it's happening right now again. But if anybody, Warren Buffett won't tell you what to do next. Even he will stop short of making a prediction because nobody predicted the Berlin Wall, the Arab uprising. No one predicts the outbreak of World War I, World War II. But I'm glad you're on the show because it does smell like teen spirit. So if it does happen to do it again, is there any advice you'd give to some kid walking out of school with $289,000 in debt?
Yeah, I think it's kind of easy. Honestly, we have it pretty darn good, us dentists. And let's just say worst case scenario, you can't manage to get a full-time job. Maybe you've got a part-time job, because let's be real. I mean, how many dentists are hiring associate? If you're not like one of those big DSOs, how many solo practitioner dentists, or maybe you got a group practice who lost a guy who needs a position to fill, but there aren't that many full-time positions, especially for guys that are right out of school. So let's just say you do something similar to what I did, where you're bouncing around from one office to the next, or let's say you can only get one job and it's 2 days a week or 3 days a week. We have it nice. I mean, I can't see how you couldn't make $80,000 or $100,000 doing that, working 2 or 3 days a week as a dentist, and you just weather the storm. And then, a couple of years go by, and before you know it, you're grinding again.
One of the things I've always thought was bizarre about dentistry is when you go over to Wall Street, tracking mergers and acquisitions. I mean, it's a growth pattern for so many companies, and in dentistry, it's just so underutilized. But I've met so many dentists in the last 30 years that went to some small town at 10,000 and had like 10 dentists. But every time old man McGregor retired, they would just buy the practice and fold it into theirs. And think about that. An old 65-year-old dude retires, and I buy his practice, fold it into mine, mergers and acquisition, as opposed to that guy sells it. Say I'm 56, and he sells it to some young whippersnapper named Jonathan Cook, who's got all this energy and marketing and just going to crush it. I mean, you're eliminating competition. You're buying patients, which you have to compare to your acquisition costs of a new patient. So I want you to talk about, how did you have the genius insight of M&A activity coming out of dental school? I mean, you just don't see that in dental school.
I definitely, it was not, I can't take claim for that. My first partnership was I had some tremendous lessons there. The guy who I went into partnership with was a 65-year-old guy out of New York. And he's really like kind of family. He was my brother-in-law's brother-in-law, if you can follow that. And he's an orthodontist and a general dentist. He's got a daughter who's a general dentist up there. So, at family functions, we'd see each other, and he'd always say, "Oh yeah, you're going to be my guy in Florida. I've got these 10 practices in New York, and I want to open up in Florida, and I eventually want to retire there. And you're going to be my guy." And I'd always kind of, roll it off my shoulders and say, it sounds nice. Here I am as a sophomore, junior, senior in dental school, and that wasn't even remotely on my radar. But I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And then, I graduate, I do the kind of bouncing around thing from one associateship to another, gain a lot of experience there in a couple of those practices, and, just with my speed in general. And then, he was always in touch with me, and finally called me one day, and something just clicked. I was like, you know what, what do I have to lose, you know? And so I went into partnership with him, and it was his practice model to a degree up in New York to buy these kind of underutilized practices. And so I got the idea, and I saw it come to play when we started buying practices down in Miami, which was my original practice that I purchased with him. In that case, I was 51%. I was 49%. He was 51%. So I learned some big things there. And so, you know, not to mention with the contract that we signed with the dentist who we purchased the practice from. This is an old timer. He's 72 years old. And we agreed to sign him on for a 5-year employment contract. Now, that would have put him at the age of 77 at the end of his contract. And you can imagine, you know, you're walking into you're really working in somebody else's house. I mean, it was his business that he had built over that amount of time. And I'm not saying that it can't work. It can work, but you have to really play it wisely. And the fact that 5-year contract really came back to haunt us down the road. But with that said, you know, in year one, we went from, I mean, this guy was historically doing $750,000 a year. You know, last 3 tax returns were pretty consistent. No real uptrend, no downtrend. It was really kind of had plateaued. And you know, in year one, I think we took it to 1.2, and that was literally just a matter of me doing now the endo. He was referring everything out, endo, implants, Invisalign, implementing some really basic systems. I mean, his collection policies or practices were pretty abysmal. And that was it. You know, overnight, you know, you go from 750,000 to 1.2. And then in year 2, we go to 2 million. I mean, we had some really exponential growth. So I kind of got a feel for and understood the value in folding in a practice where you're just taking in really some minor overhead, but some incredible upside, especially if you're going to buy it for the price at which they're currently running it at. You're not buying it at a premium for what you know that you can take it to. So, you know, had I known that I could take it from $750,000 to 1.2 million in the first year, I wasn't, you know, it's not like you buy the practice based on what you know the potential is. So that really benefits you hugely when it comes to, you know, economies of scale, getting patients in, it just, you know, exponentially growing the patient base. And what do you take on? You know, maybe the doctor. That's a yes or no. It depends on the scenario. Generally, I like to take on the hygienist because that's usually the person in the practice who has the most interaction with patients consistently. And you decide on the front desk, you decide on the assistants, and you go from there. But you know, there's of course a small uptick in your dental supplies, small uptick in your labs. But outside of that, you're not paying for the other physical location of, you know, just that massive overhead that typically comes with a dental practice if you're buying the physical location.
So now you primarily have 2 dental offices. You have downtown Fort Lauderdale and Lauderdale by the Sea. So you have 2 offices. Do you own the land and building, and how many offices have you rolled into those 2 locations?
Great question. So the main location is the Fort Lauderdale one. That one, we've rolled 2 separate practices into it.
Is that downtown?
So it was originally one.
Downtown?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Downtown Fort Lauderdale.
That's the main practice.
Originally, the main initial practice that we purchased in 2012, when I was still partners with my partner back down in Miami, which is a whole nother story that I can get into if you care to. So in 2012, we purchased, my partner and I, my other partner and I, John DeStefan, partnered in that practice in downtown. At the time, that practice was doing $500,000, maybe $550,000 a year. And since that time in 2012, we've merged in or folded in 2 additional practices.
And then Lauderdale by the Sea.
Lauderdale by the Sea is one practice that we purchased in 2016. and then have since folded in another practice as well. So essentially the downtown one is 1 in 3 practices, if you want to call it that. And the Lauderdale by the Sea practice is a 1 in 2 practice. So we've got one practice that folded into another existing practice.
So you call that, you call it Lauderdale by the Sea 1 in 2, and then the downtown Fort Lauderdale 1 in 3?
1 in 3, exactly, yep.
Yeah, that is, so now your new partner, you learned, the first one you were 49, he was 51, and now in this John DeStefan, you fix that, you're 51, he's 49. Talk about what that means.
Well, so, when it comes to any strategic decision, you want to feel like your voice is heard. And I'm not saying that you can't have a nice working partnership where both voices are heard, regardless of the shares breakdown. But when you have one majority partner, it can become challenging when you start to see you have different visions for the practice. When I started that practice down in Miami, I was on I had an exponential learning curve just based on how quickly things grew and how young I was. So I was taking a lot on. But you can imagine just, if I'm living in that practice and working that practice, and my partner, who's the 51% shareholder, is essentially a silent partner, it can be challenging. How do you really voice yourself to your partner and have them really understand what's going on? I mean, I had a mess on my hands at times that made it very difficult for me to manage. You can imagine me trying to, at 29 years of age, trying to manage a 72, 73-year-old guy whose house I was living in. It wasn't easy. And not to mention the staff that we retained. And a lot of these ideas and decisions were made kind of by default that my partner made. And I was okay doing that because I'm like, okay, you're 65 years old. You got your 10 practices in New York. Like, of course, you know what to do. But the message that was being missed was the fact that he wasn't living in my practice. And so he didn't really, as much of a voice as I felt like I had. I mean, how many conversations can you possibly have with somebody telling them the same thing over and over? And it just doesn't, it's not real until that person is living it. And so that wasn't going to happen. He was up in New York and I was down in Florida.
Well, there's nothing more beautiful than an org chart. And, like you look at the major religions, there's one God. If you have multiple religions, there's a God of thunder and a God of lightning. What happens? And a 51-49 just reduces so much legal battles. It's because you have an org chart. And if you own 51, you might as well own 100. So the other guy is a minority partner. But a lot of guys don't want to be the alpha male. They want to be an owner, but they don't want to be the alpha male because they think someone else does it better. So how many dentist associates do you have in those 2 locations that are employees?
So we've got myself, my partner, a periodontist, and as of mid last year, we had 3 associates, all of which, and this is again another lesson for the youngsters out there, as to how to manage and scale back your efforts and to kind of get things more simplified. So you may ask yourself, well, how do you go from having 3 associates to only 2? Again, assuming my partner is an associate and our periodontist is an associate.
Your periodontist is an associate, not a partner.
Not a partner. No.
Yeah. Okay.
What was happening was I made a purchase. My partner and I made a purchase. Our most recent merger, if you want to call it that. And this is something I wanted to touch on, which is a little bit in depth, but essentially, I go through a template or a checklist when I'm looking into purchasing a practice. And that checklist is really exhaustive. What I, as I've done this many times, I tend to just, I'll add a few more things to the checklist of things that I think are important to take heed to. And so This is one thing in particular that I don't have to learn the lesson twice. Essentially, this guy was, a patient would come in, they'd run their credit, they'd get approved for $10,000 worth of Care Credit, Lending Club, Green Sky, you name it. And the amount of work that actually needed to be done when it was all treatment planned was, let's call it $7,000. So there's a difference of $3,000. He'd run it all. So what happened when I went to buy that practice, when I go through all those checklists and I've got that template, everything's checking off. I'm like, oh, this is great. The guy was 2 blocks away from us, similar practice, similar patient base, similar demographics, ready to retire, okay with, staying on for a year to kind of help that transition occur. His hygienist was okay, was fine staying on. So everything kind of was aligned to make sense where we could take his practice that was historically doing $700,000. And I'm like, okay, at minimum, we're going to do 8, 9, 10, like, $1 million. What can we make of a $700,000 practice just based on history, what we've done in the past? And so you can imagine those numbers were inflated because of what he was doing. It was, really arguably criminal. You're billing, you're running a credit for an amount that the treatment plan doesn't, match up to. So where he was doing 700, what was he really doing? What were those true numbers? And so, after seeing it for long enough, I figured I really felt like 40 to 30% was the difference. So you can imagine you think you're buying a practice that's doing 700,000. We were going to continue to do the whole scheme that he had going on, obviously. So that went from, a practice that we, not only do we have to deal with the revenue that we weren't going to take on, but we also had to deal with the ramifications of what, all these patients that were calling us. Almost on week 1, we had patients calling us saying, oh, you owe me money and this and that. And you can imagine what sort of like an energy drain that was, and trying to manage him and the hygienist that we retained on. And so, we ultimately parted ways amicably, luckily. And he had a 1-year employment contract. So we got things under wraps as soon as we started to see these things that, were happening. The first time he came to my office manager, it was like, oh yeah, just run it. And we're like, what are you talking about? You can't just do that. So, it was patient number 1 that we kind of, our ears were perked, and it was a bit of a red flag. And so I was poised to take on this $1 million pop. I'm thinking, okay, we're at 3.5, 4 million here. We're gonna be at 5 million by the end of the year. Reasonable to assume based on history. Not even close. So because of that, I hired 2 more associates. Again, they were kind of staggered, but there was an absolute upswing in our patient numbers. I knew that based on his numbers that there would be a natural overflow at the downtown office, because that's where we merged that practice into. So any overflow, if we were just too jam-packed, Lauderdale by the Sea would take on those patients, and boom, it's a happy, beautiful thing. It obviously wasn't the case. So what happened? Well, we kind of, in a way, got lucky because one of the associates, unfortunately, 2 of his parents had cancer, and he had to go back to New York. So in a way, I was like, I was happy, because I was like, you know what, I can't really, I was paying him $500 a day. I couldn't justify keeping him on based on what ended up happening with this practice that I was so poised to assume was going to have plenty of patients to go around. So that's that associate. Another associate retired. I loved him. He was amazing. That was the first practice that we rolled into our original practice. He stayed with us for 3 years, 2 years more than he was expecting to stay on, but he just loved it. And he loved his dental life once he came on because of how things were set up. And honestly, he was actually making more money with us after selling his practice than he did when he was running his own practice, literally just by implementing some simple systems. His collection practices weren't great either. And, but man, oh man, was that was a great they should all be that way, but unfortunately they're not. So, I've seen them go sideways. I've dealt with lawsuits. Like I said, I just had a very fast learning curve with that original practice that I bought in Miami, merging two practices into that one. If you want to get into details there, I got plenty of great stories, but
to avoid those issues, what dental law firm do you use for mergers and acquisitions, and do they do any forensic accounting and auditing responsible for those numbers?
Good question. I don't have a dental law firm that I deal with. I have a law firm that's down the street from us, old friend. He's done plenty of dental mergers and acquisitions over the years. He doesn't strictly do dental mergers and acquisitions. I had a law firm up in Delray for a little bit, but I just felt like there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge base that came from that. And as far as forensics go, I just don't feel like anybody would look at it the same way I did. And I really thought that I was doing everything right. And I had a great template to work from. I was able to, dig deep into the patient charts, see what kind of pending treatment, look at old x-rays. I mean, I was looking at x-rays on a viewfinder, for crying out loud, for some of these offices, because they just didn't have digital dentistry. So you can imagine how tedious that would be. And I've said no to some practices over the years too. I think some of those are some of my best decisions, were the times in which I said no. It doesn't make sense for XYZ reasons. But to answer your question, you got to dig deep into those charts. You got to ask, if you can, ask get some sort of inside information with the staff. And I've done that over the years. A great way to go about it is to have a dental supply rep. I mean, a lot of these guys know that world better than anybody. And, they walk into an office, they know one that's successful, one that's not, just by the energy when they walk through the door. So, we've got a guy that we rely heavily on for that. So you put all those things together, and usually it's a recipe for success.
What supply company is he with?
Patterson.
Kudos.
Sorry. He's with Henry Schein now. He was with Patterson.
Okay.
He's now with Henry Schein.
Yeah, my reps in 31 years has worked for, I think, 3 of them: Schein, Benco, Patterson. But kudos to you. I mean, you're looking deep inside these practice numbers, and a lot of my homies listening to you right now, they got to look deep into their soul. Listen to what this business guy is saying, how he looks into the numbers. I mean, I hear people working as an associate, and it doesn't matter if they're a DSO or a private practice, and they're talking crap about it and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, well, what's the code for a crown? How many percent? Yeah. They don't know any numbers. They know no numbers, and then they just want to, they just want to go from occlusion they want to go from Quace to Spear to Pankey to Ross to all these people. It's like, okay, you love your art, I love that, but you don't know any of your numbers. How do you compare mergers and acquisitions, rolling them into your existing office versus just spending that money on marketing and advertising? How do you know which would be lower cost to get a per capita head into your practice, marketing or mergers and acquisitions?
That's a really good question. I like the idea of having multiple funnels. What can go wrong? Let's say you're ramping up your marketing efforts and you're seeing good return on your investment. If you buy a new practice, let's say you're doing $1 million a year, and you buy a practice that's doing 400,000, let's just say, and you know that you can take that 400 to 600. So now you got a $1.6 million practice. How can you go wrong by increasing your bottom line, what you're taking home, and now shuffling that money towards marketing efforts as well? It's like a steamroller that just keeps generating steam. So I have to say, I feel like on both fronts, I'm going to always attack the marketing, and I'm also going to always have the feelers out, because you never know when that next practice comes up. So, I don't weigh the two against each other. I just know, based on history, just how profitable they can be. And so most often it's how comfortable do I feel with the bank account? You know, how much profit have we had over the last 6 months, over the last year? You know, we purchased 2 practices in 2016, 2 in 2017. Once 2017 happened, and that last one being the one that we had all those troubles with, you can imagine I was like, all right, 2018, we're going to hold up here. We're going to, take a deep breath, get things back into gear, get that negative energy out of the office, and start rolling again. And so we've really ramped up our marketing over the last year because we weren't acquiring practices. So, look, I mean, it all depends on what's on the plate. You know, if there's a practice that I'm really, that I've been, if I've been courting a dentist for a number of months or years, I got some guys that are on for I've been calling and in touch with them for 3-4 years. You just never know when that's going to come. But, you speak of the 2008 and how everything, took a massive blow. A lot of these old timers that were set up to retire. They were like, okay, I'm good in 2008, 2009, 2010, whatever, right around that time frame. And then what happened? A lot of them lost massive amounts of wealth in that downturn. And so now those guys that were poised to retire in 2008, 9, 10, even 11, 12, you name it. Now they're not only are they having to scale back and say, wait a second, I got to change what my expectations were of retiring, but now they're even more afraid to sell at 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, because they're like, well, wait a second, all this money that I'm putting into stocks or real estate, whatever it might be, what if there's another downturn? So you got all these scared turkeys out there that are also way up there in their years, and it's kind of like a recipe for to have a lot of really good quality offices out there that you can merge into yours, because they're hanging on for dear life, and they should have retired back in 2008, 9, or 10, but they're still plugging along because they're afraid and they lost so much wealth. So, it's kind of like this perfect storm of these guys that are, they're 80 years old, 85, and you're like, why are they still hanging on, and for a lot of them, that's the reason.
So to have 2 locations, what management information software do you use to have 2? Is it cloud-based, or do you have 2 separate IT systems, hardware? What do you do?
No, the beautiful thing now, look, every program has its pros and cons, but I'm really loving how you just get, if you got Wi-Fi, you got internet, you're on. It's not open. It's Dentrix Ascend. It's the new Dentrix. I don't know. They named it Ascend. I don't know, for whatever reason, but it's a cloud-based Dentrix essentially, but it's very, very different from Dentrix. Nothing about it looks similar to Dentrix, the old traditional Dentrix. But I love it because I can be anywhere. Sorry.
That's what Heartland Dental uses. Rick Workman out of Effingham. He's got 900 locations on Dentrix Ascend.
Okay, hey, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. So, so it's at both practices or anywhere that I happen to be, I just jump online and I can access both locations, no problem.
So, there's a lot of really big businesses coming in dentistry that find dentist associates, because there's all these DSOs, and they can put hundreds of dentists to work on any given day. You bounced around, you said, from associate to another. Why do you think associates bounce around? What % of associates can look in the mirror like you and I do and say, I want to do the business of dentistry and the art? Versus what % of these dentists do you think, if they took an honest look in the mirror, they'd say, look, you're not committed to owning your own practice, you'd be a better employee? I know that's a lot of questions.
No, that's okay. I can tell you that it can't be more than 5 or 10% of, like, when, I immediately think of my class, my graduating class. How many of those kids at the time had a real business sense? And it can't be more than 5 or 10%. So they got to be honest with them.
So do you think that, or are you saying that when they graduate from dental school, that 90% of them probably want to just be employees their whole life and only 10% want to be owners? Or are you saying they're not ready for it and someday they will?
Great question. I think that that definitely a larger percentage of them think that they can be owners, but don't have business sense, and either are willing to learn it, because let's be honest, I mean, it's learnable, or aren't willing to learn it, or they just start chasing their tail, kind of like you always say, which is, they try to throw everything at their practice by, getting continuing education. They're like, oh, but if I only buy this laser, then and only then will I be successful, or then I can market to a different type of patients or whatever. They're so clinically minded. They don't open the door for business, and I just think that they kind of it's natural for us as clinicians to go in that direction, to always be kind of pulled in the direction of continuing education and, let me learn a little bit of laser, let me learn some implants and implement that in my practice, and now all of a sudden I'll be successful. Well, if you're spending all this money on all these implant courses and you're getting just as little return on the patients that are coming through the door as you are with your current patients, not having that information and knowledge base, then you're really ruining yourself and setting yourself up for disaster, because now you've purchased all that implant supplies and materials and all that, and you're ready to go. And you've got Sally at the front desk who's not answering the phone. You've got so-and-so trying to close the case, and she's got a 10% closure rate. And so you're just losing all these patients and all these opportunities to actually make a buck. And so I think that's the vast majority of dentists. So 5 to 10% may have like a real business sense. Another maybe 10 or 20% get out there, open their own practice, don't really have much of a business sense, but know how to figure it out for themselves. And then the rest are just, then there's probably another 20 or 30% who go out there, don't learn it, open the practice, think that they're a dentist and don't realize that they're actually a business owner. And so, the remainder are just those that are perfectly suited to be associates.
And that's why I was telling them, get your house in order, get your house in order. And they're always in a failing restaurant, and they think if we just add lasagna or beef stroganoff, we're going to be successful. It's like, well, you weren't successful with steaks and salads and baked potatoes, but beef stroganoff's going to do it, huh? And they
Exactly.
don't want to face HR, accounting, legal, marketing, phones, treatment plan presentations, knowing their numbers. When you're doing a merger and acquisition, how far away do you think that in a Fort Lauderdale area before the patients say, you know what, this is a good excuse to find a new dentist. I'm tired of driving that far. How close do they need to be?
Great question. 5 miles. That's where I've kind of set the radius. Anything outside of that, if more people are going to get drawn to your practice nowadays, and I'm not saying this is 100% across the board, but nowadays, more people are going to be drawn to your practice because they are searching for your practice, searching for a practice online, and they're getting drawn into your practice because they see great online reviews. They like the way that their website looks. They like what they see on social media. All these things are going to get them convinced that you're the place for them before they even decide to make the phone call. So if it happens that you're 5 miles away, okay, you get in the car, and yes, traffic can be terrible around Fort Lauderdale, but worst case scenario, 5 miles can't be more than 20, 25 minutes. So, which is not a big deal.
And, it's just so cool. Like these dentists want to learn something simple, like placing an implant. They feel they got to get in an airplane, fly across the country, drop $3,000 somewhere when they could have rode their big wheel across the street to a periodontist who's a lonely introvert who's dying for a friend and just would have just loved to have a friend. And then you feel good when you help another human or a dog or a cat. And knowing every dentist within a 5 mile radius and popping the question like, hey, I'm young Jonathan and you're an old fart. Oh, I got to tell you my old fart joke. So I was teasing one of my grandkids this weekend, a Sunday, and I said, hey, why are you doing your hair? Why don't you shave your head and look just like grandpa? And she said, I don't want to be old. She associated bald with
oh
old.
my God.
But you know, when you go to that young, those older dentists by you, they got to look at you differently now. Now you're this friend. They're sitting there thinking, dude, I'm 60 years old, and this Jonathan guy is 5 miles up the street, and he's already popping the question. Maybe we should get married someday and sell me your practice. You'd have to have better relationships. More likely, he'd leave his emergencies on call with you. I mean, just not talking crap about it. Yeah, it's more environment. So is it fair to say that if you're an urban dentist, you should consider acquiring every selling dental practice within a 5-mile radius of you?
Yes.
And what would you say urban would be? I mean,
look,
rural.
There are obviously some. I'd say that jokingly, but there are some limitations. I mean, as you can imagine. I mean, look, I don't take Medicaid. I don't take HMOs. Those are ruled out. But the most important thing that I'm looking for now, when I am, one of the things that I added to my lengthy list of, my due diligence list is personality. You know, if you don't mesh, you can arguably get by for a year, which can work, because now you've got this dentist who you've pulled into your practice, and he kind of passes the baton over the course of a year. But most importantly, you have light at the end of the tunnel. So even if you don't click, he doesn't mesh with some staff members or whatever the case, I mean, it's 2 recare appointments away. You know, it's 12 months. It's not the end of the world. So I find that's a pretty nice, happy medium where you can, get by and have everybody part ways amicably.
I love it how you are specific on the criteria. You don't take Medicaid. You don't take HMOs. Another one is, which I'm sure you're aware of, is culture. There are just probably, they think somewhere around 2 to 4% of humans are sociopaths. And there's just dentists selling their practice where you can just tell they're either not right in the head, or evil, or they're broken mentally, a sociopath. But the culture, you never want to do M&A activity or partnership with someone who has a different culture. Rant on the hard lessons you've learned on culture.
Great question. So I had a bipolar dentist, legitimately bipolar. And, from one day to the next, you just never knew what you were going to get. And screaming and yelling at staff members. That was the original practice that I bought down in Miami. And it is an absolute killer. I mentioned that, when I purchased the practice, he was doing $750,000 and we took it in year 1 to 1.2, but what if it could have been 1.5? But we lost the $300,000 because of the energy that was being sucked out of that business and the negative effect that it had on the staff, and just the cancer spreads. So culture is so huge in my practice. We talk about it at almost every morning huddle. We talk about it at every monthly meeting, whether it's a management meeting or a team meeting, for both teams, both offices. We talk about it at our quarterly team building events. So it's repeated and repeated and repeated. If you don't stick to your guns and look, before you know it, you look around and you see everybody kind of almost mimicking each other. They get why it is that we do what we do, and they understand the culture, and they understand why the culture is so important. And so, like I said, birds of a feather flock together. Before you know it, you've got everybody rolling in the same direction and believing in something bigger than themselves. So culture for us is right there at the very top. And it's mostly, look, I think it would have naturally came regardless, but a lot of it has to do with my past experience of being in these. I mean, I was in the lion's den. I really was. And it wasn't just with one, it was with 2. And, these are guys that you take on and you try to make it work, and you try to keep them at bay. And, but there's only so much you can do.
So, I agree that untreated bipolar people that are moody every day, they're so high, they're so toxic, and, they can be so nice for 5-6 days, and they can just tear someone a new one. Then people start falling in love with them and they make excuses for them. Well, you know, she's having a bad day. And
Yep.
it's like you got to get that fixed or you can't be here. But toxic staff, moody staff, it just can't do it. And then with criminal activity, or do you think on the criminal activity, do you think they're totally smart dentists that know they're criminals, or do you think they're mentally broken sociopaths who can't really distinguish? Like I'll give rare examples. Like a lot of dentists got mad at me because I posted on Dental Town the dentist that had a hidden camera in his bathroom was filming it, and I thought, well, if there's 211,000 Americans alive with a dental degree and one guy gets arrested for doing this, someone else is doing it, and maybe posting this, some dumbass will say, you know, I better take that down. Everybody got mad and said, well, why are you talking shit about dentists? It wasn't even 4 months, and another dentist was arrested for it. And I'm sitting here thinking, you have a hidden camera in your bathroom. Are you completely broken, insane, and weren't born right? Or are you a normal dentist and just that weird? I always have a hard time. But I did listen to a long lecture on it. And they said when you look at some of these massive criminal empires like Nazi Germany or many of these regimes, they said there was no history of mental illness among 90% of the leaders. They were just doing purely evil stuff. Do you think when you're dealing with criminal activity with dentists, do you think they're more mentally broken, or are they a sociopath, or are they just evil, or does it not even matter? You got to deal with them the same anyway.
I mean, you got to deal with them the same either way, but I think that they they're humans. They convince themselves that what they're doing is okay. They kind of justify it in their own mind. And before they're doing it on such a repetitive basis. Maybe it's initiated because a guy's having a bad month and he's like, well, man, if I just do this one time, I can make payroll. And then all of a sudden he does it again. And it just, each time they do it, it gets easier and easier. So that has to have been the case, at least with this guy that came in with us. And so, sure, could have been a sociopath and just not even at all in tune with what's going on, and how that's wrong, or they just turn a blind eye and they're like, man, they justify it in their head. So,
dentist associate turnover is so high. What advice would you give to dentists who have an associate to be better employers? Is it picking them at HR? Can you just kind of tell the people that are going to bounce around? Is it an HR pick? Like the NFL draft is next week. And I mean, these guys take HR, I think, more serious than any business I've ever seen. I mean, they just take HR serious.
Yeah, I would agree.
So if your goal was to reduce dentist associate turnover, what advice would you give?
Well, if it's coming from the owner dentist perspective, I mean, start teaching them. It doesn't cost you any money. It's a way to justify them not making as much money as you hope that they would. A lot of these dentists, when they take on associates, they have all these grand ideas that everybody's going to ride off into the sunset, and a lot of times that's just not the case. If a dentist comes on and they're in their own mind, they're like, man, I just $150,000 is what I need, and I know that I'm worth that. So then when they're churning out dentistry and they're maybe making $100,000 a year, there's going to be some bitterness and some resentment there that breeds. But if the owner dentist is there and is able to give them something more than just money, then now all of a sudden they're just less likely to get disgruntled and upset. And look, who knows? Maybe in year one you made 100, but in year two, everything's humming and you're making 125, and you see this uptick. And when everybody's happy and patients pick up on that, everyone benefits. And so there's nothing worse than having an associate that's not happy, and it almost always comes down to money. They're not making enough money. So I would just say, take them under their shoulders, and every free minute that they have, bring them in and teach them not just clinical stuff, but also business stuff. Maybe they want to learn that too. I took one under my wing and I taught them a lot about the business, a lot. A lot of people will call me stupid for it. They say, why are you teaching this associate all your tricks and insights? And I'm like, don't care about that. I'm not worried about that. I just want to teach and help this guy learn. And he's asking the questions. So I'm assuming he's interested in the subject. So I taught a lot about clinical stuff. I taught him a lot about business, and if a day came or a week came and he's like, he has a crappy paycheck, it's not as bad as it would be if he didn't like you.
Yeah. And listen to what Jonathan's saying. I mean, there's a lot of dentists will post on Dental Town, I got 2 associates, which one should I take? And it's just accounting mechanisms. Like, really? I mean, imagine if Tinder was like that. They had no pictures or anything, just purely a bunch of numbers. Being an associate at a DSO where there's nobody in that office that owns the place. Let's say you come out of school and you really love implants. Well, getting an associate job with someone whose places, 101 implant a week or more is not something numerical. I always found it bizarre when you look at these dental lawyers who are in practice transition. They show the office is just all numbers, but I can't tell by looking at it if this office has had the average staff has been there 7 to 12 years, and this one the staff's only is turnover every year. It tells me nothing about the culture, and then they don't place a value on the culture, but they sure have a place for the value of 10-year-old dental equipment. And it's like, really, 10-year-old dental equipment is more important than who the hell's answering the phone and the hygienist and just everything that matters. An accountant is really a glorified historian. So how do you incentivize your staff? You were talking about you incentivize staff to build their own following on social media and how to get all staff on board with creating content for social media. Do you think social media is a big part of marketing, or do you think it's more
huge?
You think it's huge versus direct mail?
No, direct mail. Look, I mean, this market just in general in Fort Lauderdale is really saturated, but the direct mail, look, I did it for years, and maybe if I were to go back at it, maybe we get enough of a return on our investment. I doubt it, because it's so, I mean, I get my mail, I go to my mailbox, and it's 5 to 10 different dental offices that are in there with direct mail. I mean, how do you choose? It's too saturated. In fact, I mean, I was doing that in like 2011, 2012, when I first started, and there was a return on investment there, but man, oh man, did things come on quick. And no, I wouldn't go there personally, at least not in this market, maybe other places in the country. But social media is huge. It is just huge.
And when you say social media, what does that mean? What is define social media?
Yeah, good question. So really the big 3 players are Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, I really feel like LinkedIn is like the Instagram of 4 or 5 years ago, where there wasn't that many players in the game, but you had incredible exposure. Video, online videos, marketing, testimonials, all that sort of thing is going to grow exponentially. And really, if you're not in the game now, you're going to miss the boat.
Well, what I don't understand about LinkedIn, I mean, on Instagram, you think it's more likely to be some kid, sending selfies. Instagram, everybody has a job at a Fortune 500 company and has dental insurance.
LinkedIn has it. Everybody has it.
Oh my God. I mean, I love LinkedIn, and everybody it's almost like to be on LinkedIn, you have to be pre-screened to be intelligent. Whereas your 12-year-old cousin can be on Instagram. I mean, my gosh. What % of the people on LinkedIn do you think have dental insurance?
Oh my God. I can say the largest percentage other than Instagram and Facebook combined.
Absolutely. For sure. And I think you're the first person who's been on my show that talked LinkedIn. And that's
so I'll give you one example of Instagram, just so you can kind of wrap your head around how that's worked for us. And yes, maybe this is an anomaly, but we have had really hundreds of thousands of dollars funneling into our practice from Instagram. And this is just one particular example that I can recall in my mind. We brought a patient in who was what we would what you would define as a micro influencer. So he had like maybe 50,000 followers. He was really big into fitness. I think he was even a model. He comes into our practice.
Are you talking about me?
Ohio. You got it. Okay. Sound familiar, right?
I thought the story sounded familiar.
So he comes into the practice. He posts on his story on Instagram, I just moved from Ohio. I had to come see the best dentist in South Florida. That's all he did. He has, like I said, maybe 50,000 followers. One of his followers sees the post, calls our office, comes into the practice. It's a $25,000 case. Done. So, it is doable. You kind of have to know, and we're still working on it. I mean, we haven't figured it all out, but you got to figure out what your market angle is. And, everybody's different, but Instagram can work. Absolutely. Facebook can work. Absolutely. And all in different ways. And that's why I really love the fact that you've got these 3 different social media platforms that you're really kind of taking chunks of different markets from each. I mean, you said it yourself, Instagram can be a bunch of kids that are taking selfies, and LinkedIn is a bunch of professionals. So we just started to get an influx of patients coming in from LinkedIn as well, again, from our marketing efforts. And we're just started. I mean, this is like in a matter of 2 months. Instagram, we've been doing for more like a year or so, where we've really started to ramp things up. But
Mark Zuckerberg's dad is a dentist, Ed, and he's been on the show. And Wall Street generally says that Mark Zuckerberg's acquisition of Instagram for $1 billion was the best M&A activity forever. And the best one before that was going back in the day when Sergey, Brin, and Larry Page of Google bought YouTube for $1 billion. And that turned out to be awesome. And and the immigration, from telephone to from telegraph to telephone to text to email to an image to video. I mean, you just got to make the jump to video. But our homies they're so introvert, and it's like she doesn't want to be on a video in her deal, but it's really her, and it's so much more powerful, and you're so more likely to connect and make a relationship and have the other monkeys secrete dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and bust a move and come in. But they don't want to be on a video. What do you say to them?
Yeah.
Should they just start drinking and then?
Hey, I mean, I'm one of those people. I hate it. I really, I dislike it, but I force myself to do it. I force myself to do it because I know the power of it. It's so powerful. And I mean, like you said, I don't care if you got a good personality, shitty personality, or what. If you've got a video, you tell me what's more impactful. You walk up to somebody, you hand them their business card out at dinner because they overhear a conversation that you're a dentist, and they've got this. They leave with like this little piece of paper that says your name and address and phone number on it, or they get online, or they pick up their phone. I mean, it's it's always these things are up people's asses all day long. What's more powerful? They get on their phone and instantly they have videos that they're seeing you interacting either just with the camera or with other patients doing testimonials. It's not even a comparison.
Not only are they afraid, and I've been telling them forever, I wrote an article on it called, when people tell me, well, that's not really me. Well, then explain Hollywood. I mean, they get these actors to play murderers and every despicable human, and no one walks away and says, God, I don't like that guy anymore. He killed 3 people in that show. Yeah. I mean, I just tell them, be Doc Hollywood. It's the same thing with staff meeting. They're like, well, I'm not a good leader. Well, okay, you're not a good leader, but when you roll up to that office, before you get out of your car, you put on your Hollywood act, and you're going to walk in there and you're trying out for some lead part. And today's lead part means you got to sit there and make a 60-second video why they should come into your office. And
there you go.
I mean, today's April Fool's Day. How can you not? Why can't you just sit there and say, hey, guess what? Did you know you don't have to brush and floss your teeth anymore? April Fools, come on down right now. I mean, anything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What you just said is perfect. That's incredible. I mean,
and the other reason they won't come on the podcast or do a video or give a lecture to their local study club is they're so afraid that someone's not going to like what they said, or they're not going to. Fear of public speaking is because you're a social animal. So if you're a social animal, it's so important that everybody likes you and you dress the same and follow. So what do you, and when this dentist gets a negative online review, I swear to God, they're out there, they're standing on the ledge of their window ready to jump. Talk them down from the bridge with a negative online review. How do you handle that? Do you just seek therapy?
I mean, first of all, you can't please everybody. We all know that. But when these negative reviews do come, depending on the forum that they're posting on, you can change it. I'm not saying that, you pay the patient off, but pick up the phone, call the patient, get to the bottom of it. Sometimes this has happened many, many times for us in the past. Very often we'll call a patient and it was a simple misunderstanding. And now all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, we had a patient that wrote a 1-star review on us. My partner called him. He changed his 1-star review to a 5-star review. He said, it's just a misunderstanding and da-da-da-da. I mean, you have to be able to growing your practice is great. But if you've got just as many patients walking out the back door that are walking in the front door, then it's a losing game. So you can't afford to lose these patients. And if it's just a difference of a phone call, or the next time they come in, you say, hey, I know you weren't really pleased with your last appointment, but what is it that I can do better? How can we do better? How is it that you felt like you were done wrong? And most often, now all of a sudden you've turned that patient into a patient for life. And don't just assume, I wouldn't just assume that the negative review that's posted wherever it may be, Yelp, Google, Facebook, is there for good. You can make a difference. And if not, sometimes negative reviews come on and they're not even real reviews. You can call Yelp, Google, and explain to them why it is that you feel like it's a fake review. And we've had those over the years as well. So you just have to keep on top of it, and you have to be aware of more than half the dentists out there don't even know what reviews they have online. They don't even know how many stars they have or whatever. I mean, it's crazy.
I love that quote from Timothy Ferriss of the 4-Hour Workweek. He says, a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. So you got a negative review, you picked up the phone. That's how I've avoided so many lawsuits over 31 years.
Absolutely.
Some old man is telling me, I remember when I hygiened, I never even saw the patient. He just came in and he didn't want x-rays, and then she looked around and told me I had gum disease, and he just lost it. And the next thing you know, an attorney wants his record, but it's just a phone call. And then he said to me, he says, I'd rather talk to you in person. I said, well, it's at the end of the day. I'm going home. I'm at 48th and Elliott. I live in the foothills. If I'm going by your house, is that on the way? I can stop by your house. You can come down here. And he goes, you want to come by my house? He goes, I only live a half mile from you. I said, sure. This was before cell phones and MapQuest. Went over to his house. My God, we sat on the porch. He gave me a beer. I mean, it was just... Same thing. Awesome. They want to learn how to place implants, but they'd rather pay $4,000 for a weekend course than have an uncomfortable conversation asking the periodontist across the street if they can be your buddy. And it's always going to be a win-win if you don't think in fear and scarcity. I mean, if you learn how to do implants, I'm sure for the first 100 you're going to be placing, upper second bicuspids, maybe first molars. You're not going to be doing any all-on-4s. And if you do anterior implants on a gorgeous woman, you might as well just move to another foreign country today before you get smacked upside the head. I remember one time I was at a basketball game. It was at a Suns game, and I had all 4 of my boys there, and we ran into the periodontist. I had just given some front implant on number 8 I did, and the gums didn't turn out right, and oh my gosh, he wanted to shoot me. And I told the boys, this is the guy that fixes daddy's big mistakes. And he was laughing his head off. He goes, you owe me a beer for that one. So, bought him a beer. So kudos to have uncomfortable conversations. Same thing with staff. Staff come in Monday morning and everybody was, what was your weekend like? What did you do? And that's all fun and games. But then what I do is I clap my hands and say, okay, let's get to work. What's on the day to day. And tell me what looks good on your schedule. Tell me what looks bad. What did anything keep you up last night? So you got to switch from that. Let's all be social animals, and like 5 dogs get together, they all want to start smelling each other. Well, this is a business. We're Homo sapiens. Let's have an uncomfortable conversation. So online reviews, just have an uncomfortable conversation.
Well, yeah. And not to mention, I mean, you have these reputation builders too. I mean, how much money do people pay for these reputation builders, where they not only build your reputation, so get you, 5-star, 4-star reviews, but also you're paying them to try to attempt to remove negative reviews. And I mean, is that more wise to hire some company that's going to do that, or just pick up the phone? I just feel like, a lot of people are throwing all this money at these reputation builders, where they're missing the real picture here. The real picture is, if you're getting negative reviews on a consistent basis, there's something you're doing wrong, or your staff. So you better get on top of it quick and remedy it. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. So I feel like it's probably, I just don't feel, at least for us, it's not a wise thing to put your money towards, which is these reputation builders, where you'll pay somebody to stay on top of your negative reviews. We don't have that problem. It's not an issue, because we tackle it before it bites us in the butt.
So have you ever used a consultant?
When I was in my original practice, yes, I used some consultants out of Denver. I would go on these Denver, Colorado. Man, what was the name? The Marcus Group or something? The Marcus Group. Judy Marcus. I don't know if that name rings a bell. But they were out in Denver, Colorado. I made 4 trips up there. There was like a weekend. Each of the 4 trips, it was a weekend that we would spend there, and learn some good things. I feel like I just, I didn't use all of it. I used very little of it, but I did get some pearls. And, but that had to have been in like 2012, I want to say 2011, 2012.
Oh, Judy Marcus with Vanguard.
Yeah, there you go. Vanguard. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So you made the trip up there 4 times?
Yeah.
And
it was mostly, it was sales. It was sales. It was how do you present treatment? And I appreciate their approach. It made sense. I just, we did it for a while. I couldn't find a place for it, but getting your org boards together, I mean, I learned that from there. That's super important. But mostly just sales. And they also provided those mailers that we were talking about. That's part of their kind of package. They'll provide the design and sending out all these letter leads.
Treatment plan presentation. So many people think, well, to increase revenue, I need to add lasagna, or I need to start placing implants. And you start asking them, well, what is your treatment plan presentation? What is your close rate? They don't know. And then they tell you, I don't like sales. Well, in a way, that kind of makes me love you. I mean, you're a dentist. You went to 8 years of college to help people and do surgery with your hands, and you don't want to sell. I really respect that. But your patient's going to walk out with a lot of disease if they don't accept the treatment plan. So if you don't learn how to present the treatment, I love the fact that you don't look in the mirror as that you're some big salesman. But my gosh, I'm, at my age, my 4 boys have turned into 5 grandkids. And when I pass on, I want my grandkids to go to a dental office. And if there were 2 dentists and my grandkid had 4 cavities and he went to you and you couldn't convince him to do any, and he went to someone else and they got him to do all 4. Well, the better dentist is the one who did all 4. I don't care if it was amalgam, composite, or if he just removed the decay and packed it with butter, So how do you
hit the nail on the head? Yeah.
So how do you
hit the nail on the head?
How do you get them to do that?
So many. I think that's probably the biggest problem that dentists have psychologically. So they are constantly telling themselves that sales are bad. Closing cases. They don't even like to say those words. You hit the nail on the head. You can't prove to these patients that you're a good, bad, or somewhere in the middle dentist unless you do the work. And so you have to close the case in order to do the work. So, I think that's probably the biggest thing that most dentists have to work against, that natural feeling of, well, I just want to do the dentistry, but I don't want to, I hate the sales. I don't like having to sell somebody. Well, you better get to liking sales, or have somebody in your office, better yet, who really enjoys and likes sales, so that you can do the dentistry and they do their sales part. But at least then you get to prove to these people what kind of a dentist you are.
So who do you think should present the treatment? Do you think it should be the doctor? Do you think it should be a treatment plan presenter? Whose job is that?
I think it's whoever's job is. It's whoever's best at selling. I've had associates who were incredible at selling, and they did it themselves. So I'm happy. By all means, you go ahead and sell the treatment. I've also had office managers who are incredible at selling. So it's, I'm sure Heartland Dental has an answer for who it is that they have selling treatment, and there's a whole system there. Right now, we're maybe a little bit too small, where I'd rather just have the sales happen than assign somebody who may not be as good as someone else in the office. Every practice is different. I can say for us, I feel like the office manager closing the cases is the best if she's incentivized correctly, and most importantly, if she or he is good at closing the case.
I guess it's the same thing. So you're saying who's ever best. If Doc is miserable at it, then a treatment plan coordinator should. I guess you say the same thing about a marketing director. Some dentists have a natural flair for marketing, and others just don't get it, and they need to hire a marketing director. What did you do? Do you hire a marketing director, or is that one of the hats you wear?
Good question. So I've got a sales and marketing director. Again, it all depends on the size of your practice. If we're going to wear multiple hats as a dentist, don't get burnt out, man, because if you start wearing the marketing hat and the sales hat and the dentist hat and the manager hat and all these different hats, you just can't be good at all. You can't be great at all. And you're not going to have a long life of happiness and good health if you're going to try to run all those different aspects of the practice, of the business. So, I've got a sales and marketing director. That was the first time I hired for that position was literally exactly a year ago today. So that was a huge move for us, and it's worked out great. And so he spearheads most of the marketing, but of course we always have an open conversation, and a lot of the stuff I'm driving. If I come up with an idea, I say, hey, I pitch it to him, and he pitches me ideas, and we go back and forth that way. But it's seemed to work so far.
So you're 38 years old. I mean, you're a baby. I'm almost 57, 50. I'm 20 years older. What is your 5-year plan? Or do you even have an exit strategy? You got 2 big offices. Are you thinking 5 years I'm going to sell this to a DSO, or where you want to be in 5 years? And do you or do you not have an exit strategy?
So I had an exit strategy when I was still in dental school, believe it or not. Nice. I was thinking about how I was going to live my best life as an owner dentist, and certainly as owning is having as many, regardless of the number of locations, having as many associate dentists working for me as possible, where I've always said it, where if I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, you know what, I really want to do dentistry today, I go and I do dentistry. And if I wake up in the morning and I say, I just don't really feel like doing dentistry, I don't have to do dentistry. My 2 hands, the business doesn't rely on my 2 hands to produce that dentistry and that income. So that's where I've started. I mean, literally from the time I was in dental school. And so to answer your question, I think that exit strategy, I'm going to be in this game for life. I'm not the type to retire. To what degree will how will my roles change over the years? It's tough to say, but I love what I do. And, 5 years from now, that might change. I might really feel like, my role has warped or morphed into something different. And, 5, 10, 20 years from now, if 30, 40, 50 years from now, I don't know, if what will happen is I will have an exit strategy that allows me to do I'll have multiple different options, so whether it's a big DSO that snatches us up, certainly that's a possibility. And that looks like the direction that things are headed. There's no dental associate is coming out of school, whether you've been out for a year or 5 years or 10 years, who's saying, oh, I want that $5 million practice down the road. So I think that DSO is probably the more likely direction, but maybe I have kids that want to take it on, or my partner has kids, or, somebody else comes in and they want to take, they want to buy a share of the business. So there's a lot of different avenues that we can go. I just know that I do have options, and I'm always going to have my options open. I can't imagine a scenario where, I'm one of these 65, 70, 75-year-old dentists who are around the corner here who never thought of an exit strategy. They don't even know what that is. And they have no real direction or understanding for what they need to do to get themselves into a position to sell.
American Dental Education Association says the average dental student's coming out $287,331 for 2017. What technology do they want to buy? Because some of them think, well, I need to do Lanap, there's $125,000. I need to do chairside milling with CEREC, there's another $140,000. I need to do place implants, the CBCT's $100,000. They can double that student loan debt in 3 purchases. So what would you tell all your the babies coming out of Nova right up the street from you? What technology do you think is a return on investment, and do you have to have?
None of them.
Oh,
none of them.
Oh, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Let me apply cardiac arrest to myself.
When you're first getting out, man, that should not. What should be on your radar is, hey, maybe there's a dental practice, a booming dental practice that you know of, and the guys or girls are cool, they're down to earth, they totally take me under their wing. They've got a bunch of associates working for them, so me just poking my head in one day isn't much of a disturbance. And those practices are going to have a Lanap or a CEREC machine. You go there and you learn based on that. But to come out of school with that kind of debt and then to just add to it, hoping that you're going to knock it out of the park because you bought some piece of technology, man, you better get your education with business and learning how to make money and drive growth in your practice before you even consider getting any sort of technology. Those are massive price points, and they just eat up at the bottom line.
And the other thing is, in my 56 laps around the sun, when people are referring someone to their doctor, like, oh, you should go to my doctor or my OBGYN or my cardiologist, they never mention what kind of MRI machine he has or what scent. No. They never mention any technology. They only mention how that doctor made them feel. And a lot of times, if they compare it to someone else, well, I had this OBGYN and he was just a complete butthead. And then I found this other lady and she's so nice. You know what I mean? So would you rather have a doctor with a laser and a CAD scan and an MRI and no personality, or just a loving, warming dentist that makes you feel good?
I mean, the latter. It's a no-brainer.
So same question, but not technology. But what they come out of Nova, they barely know anything. They've done 50 fillings, 15 crowns, 15 canals of endo, maybe 10 units of removable. What dental specialties have a higher return on asset? I mean, I look at you. You do cosmetic dentistry, veneers, porcelain crowns, implants, teeth bleaching, bridge work, prosthetics. What procedures? I'll hold your feet down. What would be a better return on investment? Learning how to do Invisalign or placing implants, or where would you tell them to go towards?
Well, it kind of depends. If you buy your own practice and when you graduate, let's say, and I just feel like you get more bang for your buck and you've got more peace of mind if you were to bring in these traveling periodontists are all over the place now. And, you get to know, maybe it's a classmate of yours or somebody who is in a class ahead of you. But I just feel like that's a better angle to attack if you own your own practice and you're just kind of getting going. Once you get to a point where you're in total growth mode and you've got a bunch of money in the bank, man, by all means, take the implant courses and maybe you can, get rid of the periodontist if you feel that that's necessary. But if you're an associate, Invisalign is got to be, it's the easiest. It's great. It's a great return on your investment. You're not dealing with surgery, not having to worry about any sort of complications that come about. I mean, what kind of complication can come from moving a tooth a little bit too far? I mean, Invisalign has that technology that's built into it where you can't move the tooth too far too fast before you catch it, right? So, there's just a very little downside to learning how to do Invisalign and a lot of upside. So if I were to choose one or the other as an associate coming out, or, I'm year 1 or year 2 out, I'd take an Invisalign course.
And the other thing, you got to have a love for numbers. When Dennis asked me that, I was having dinner with a couple of dentists the other night, and I said, well, and he's been in practice 30 years. I said, well, how many root canals do you refer out a month? Or it's basically, we just finished the first quarter of 2019. So in the first quarter of 2019, tell me units and dollars of what you referred. He has no idea. And he's asked me if he should learn Invisalign or implants. Maybe it's business in 3 words of supply and demand. Maybe if you're referring out 4 molars a week, then let's look at molar endo. And we talked about so many things, and we went so far over. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing what you know in hope, growth, and abundancy instead of living in a cave in fear and scarcity. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, really.
All right, have a rockin' hot day.